Yo, what's up? This is Kyle with Explore the Adventure. I am back here in Phoenix, Arizona, and the last couple of videos you saw me in Sedona, Arizona, and I was telling you about just my whole journey, about how I got into spirituality, how I started with astral projection, and just everything to do with that. Just as a quick recap, I spoke about the meeting my roommate, or the necromancer. I spoke about dating an empath, and I spoke about just the details of what happened there. And now I think I left off where I was just leaving Riverside. I had just ended my relationship with the woman I was dating at the time, the empath, and I was just going home. So picking up on that, I went home. I went home back to the Bay Area. I had just had all of these weird experiences that I just didn't even know how to explain. I had all of these weird experiences that needed to come out. I needed to tell people about it. So slowly but surely, I began to tell my friends about this. And what's crazy enough, what confirmed my beliefs at the time that there is something bigger going on to this, that the people that I met so far weren't just isolated cases, just random cases. I ended up meeting friends who had their own forms of precognition. I had a friend who, when I started to tell him about the story of what happened back in Riverside and the people I met, he actually told me that he would also have these dreams of the future. He would also dream of things before they ever happened. And he was actually very thankful that I told him, because he thought he was going crazy. He thought that he was going insane. He thought that he might have needed psychological help of some sort. But when I told him about precognition and how it works, his form of precognition was very similar. Now, the cool thing about him was that this is when I first started to see that everyone has their own form of psychic ability. Maybe 2 people may have precognition, or 3 people, or whatever, but everyone's precognition will work differently, and they might access it in different ways, and they might express it in different ways, or they might experience it in different ways. So my friend, when he would be having his little dreams, his visions, during a vision, he would be seeing the event happening. He's seeing the event happening, and then he would have 2 choices. Or not 2 choices, he would have different choices, multiple choices. And he knew that whatever choice he made, he knew the outcome of it. So, after waking up, after going about his normal daily routine, he would end up living that same situation again. And then when the same situation would come about, he would know that he would have a choice. He would know that he would have a choice in what to do. I had another friend. She would have different forms of precognitive visions, and she told me of an experience where she happened to see the vision happen, and then she actually saw the vision happen in reverse. It was just very fascinating just to hear about these different visions that people would have. And from going back to the Bay Area, I continued to meet more people who would have different forms of just being able to perceive things outside of the normal 5 senses. Now, I was about to say psychic abilities, but right now, I want to call it just ability to perceive things, as I said, beyond the 5 senses. I feel getting further into these videos and getting further into what I believe, I feel that the word psychic has too many negative connotations to it. Too many negative connotations of people who are just kind of overly woo-woo-ish or overly spiritual. So I met another friend who could perceive things outside of the normal 5 senses. His gift, one of the most fascinating gifts I've come across, was that he could look at people in the eye. He could look people in the eyes, and then he would immediately get information that normally wouldn't be known to people unless they had known those people for a very long time. He would get information about people that is so subtle that it's very hard to pick up unless you have his gift. So there were times where I would hold up a photo of someone and he'd look at the photo, or even like our other coworkers at the time, because I met him through work. Our other coworkers at the time would show him pictures of their loved ones, and then he would start giving them information about these people, and it was just so fascinating to see. And it was so fascinating asking him for readings on people, because he would just look at them and go, oh, they're this, this, and this, and they experience the world this way, and they carry themselves in this way because of this. And it was just cool. So after coming back to the Bay Area, and after experiencing everything that I experienced in Riverside, I kept on telling people about my experiences. But the thing is, of course, not everyone is going to accept or appreciate people when they talk about like things that are perceived outside of the five senses, when people talk about New Age stuff, because there are some people who need legit physical concrete proof in order to believe something. And one of my friends was like that. When I was telling him my story about what happened in Riverside and all of that, he actually became, I know he was offended and I know he was hurt. One, he was offended because all of these beliefs and all of these experiences were just so outside of his reality that he couldn't accept it. And two, he was hurt because he was like, yo, you're my best friend. Why didn't you tell this to me earlier? And I didn't tell him earlier because I knew he wouldn't accept it. I knew that I just felt that he wasn't going to be so open about it. So with every story that I told my friend, he had a logical reasoning behind why it wasn't real. He had some sort of logical argument behind why what I experienced was nothing more than a cognitive bias or some sort of logical fallacy. He had a logical explanation as to why what I was experiencing or what other people were experiencing wasn't real. Now here's the thing about me, about my personality, is I am on a journey to find the truth, and I'm on a journey to find reality. So on this journey, in finding the truth and finding reality, I have to even question myself if I'm doing something that is taking me away from reality, if I'm doing something that's taking me away from truth. So when my friend was telling me to look up logical fallacies, to look up logical biases or cognitive blind spots, I took his word and I told myself, you know what? He's possibly right. And from that moment on, I remember on that day, I experienced one of the greatest forms of cognitive dissonance I've ever experienced in my life, because on one hand, I had all of these beliefs about spirituality, and on the other hand, I had all of these beliefs now, or just all of these considerations about logic, about blind spots, about how I might just be deceiving myself. So both of these belief systems were just conflicting with each other, and they just weren't working out with each other. And it was incredibly frustrating to experience. So I ended up looking more deeply into logical fallacies and all of that. And for a while, basically, just to shorten this, I would go in and out of different belief systems. I would experience a lot of friction between being a very spiritual person and a lot of friction between being a very logical person. And it would constantly go back and forth. One moment I'd be like, everyone's just deceiving themselves. Everyone's just creating belief systems of their own that isn't real. And on another hand, I'd be like, oh, the world is spiritual. We all came from somewhere before this. We all chose our lives before this. Everyone is energy. Everything's energy. And then I would just keep going back and forth. Now, thankfully, where I am today, I have a balance between logic and spirituality. And it's just like, you can have both. You really can. It's just that you have to work it out for yourself. And that's the thing. The key word here is homeostasis, because our brains have ways of just coming back to level, coming back to homeostasis, coming back to just balance. So I was able to finally integrate logic and spirituality together. I'll talk more on that later. So in experiencing all of this and seeing people with different abilities, I asked myself, could I develop my own psychic abilities? Would I be able to develop a sense that is outside of the original 5 senses? And yes, I was able to. With precognition, I was able to manifest my own vision just by off of pure desire, just off of pure intent and desire, just off of pure just wanting it so bad. Now, it was a very small vision, and it was a very insignificant vision, but it was a vision nonetheless. And it came true, and it was just so fascinating to see how I could perceive something before it could ever happen. One other reason, real quick, that I believe that other people have these visions was because I experienced it once in my childhood before. I saw something happen before it ever happened. I remember experiencing that as a child, and I remember as it happened, I was just like, wait a second, I dreamt about this. I dreamt about this to the point where I know I dreamt about it. And it was crazy. It was crazy because it was just like, that's not supposed to be possible, but I just did it. So I'm not sure why, but when I was on YouTube, I kept on seeing these videos about how to astral project, and I decided, if there's one psychic ability I want to develop, it would have to be astral projection. The reason for that is because I've seen multiple videos of people talking about it, and they spoke about how apparently astral projection is like the master key of psychic abilities. Like, if you can do astral projection, you can unlock all psychic abilities. That actually, talking about this makes me want to talk about what I think about where psychic abilities come from, why we experience it, and just the whole structure of reality. And once you understand the structure to reality, you can understand why psychic abilities operate in the way that they do, or why people can experience things the way that they do. So yeah, I started to randomly delve into astral projection, and as you've seen in probably my very first video, I practiced for months. I practiced for about 4 months of just lying on my bed, not seeing results, not really going anywhere, and questioning whether this was actually real or not. So when I first hit the vibrations, when I first felt those vibrations coming out of my third eye, and I was able to go into a very, very extremely lucid experience where I felt the vibrations go throughout me, and I was able to see things and hear things. It was just so ridiculously out there that I was just like, okay, this is a part of what people told me I would experience. And these otherworldly vibrations, these feelings throughout my body, that's not something that I've ever experienced in this lifetime so far. So it's just crazy. It's like I'm continually thinking about what's possible out there. Tangent side note, when I came back home from Riverside, I was always paranoid about like what other people might be feeling off of me, or what other people might be perceiving off of me. Like, oh, can they listen to what I'm thinking? Can they see what I'm feeling right now? Can they see things? Can they see things about me that I don't know about? But then later, I became comfortable, because it's like, even if they could perceive those things about me, they're seeing that about everyone, to the point where, why would I be special? It's like I'm not. I'm just one thought out of many different thoughts. I'm one emotional energy out of many different emotional energies. So ultimately, it's just a whole mix that doesn't entirely matter. Okay, so I'm wrapping this up. That was my story about coming back to the Bay Area after experiencing everything from Riverside, just on a really quick update. On my next video, I'm going to try and I'm going to talk about my beliefs about what all of this just means, just all together. I'm going to talk about where these abilities come from, why we experience these abilities, and just the structure of nature and the structure of the universe in the best possible way I can. It's going to be very abstract, but at the same time, if you're into it, you're into it. So anyways, thank you for joining me. I'll see you in the next video. I'll see you in the next update. Peace.